Well, let's take a look now at footage of Prime Minister Tony Abbott earlier this year.
Obviously, the Australian government deplores any use of torture, but we accept that sometimes in difficult circumstances, difficult things happen.
Great. Trevor, can you tell me about the Australian government's support for the Rajapaksa regime and what impact this has on our international reputation?
Well, our reputation has been totally and utterly trashed. As you saw there, Tony Abbott has stood aside from our traditional allies, really, in the US, Canada and the UK. Choggum last year, he stood on a platform, and when he was asked about the torture that many Tamils undergo, he said, well, difficult things happen in difficult circumstances. This is unprecedented for a Prime Minister to say such a thing, but it doesn't just stop at that. In order to service a domestic political slogan, which is stop the boats, the Australian government has got into bed with a very brutal regime to the point where last March at the UN Human Rights Council, Australia, for the first time, went against the vote of the UK, the US and Canada, and sided with, of all people, China and Russia, and refused to co-sponsor a resolution that instigated a war crimes investigation into the Rajapaksa regime.
Was this resolution successful?
Yes, it was, and that means that the Rajapaksa regime is officially under investigation for war crimes and crimes against humanity. And yet we invite these accused war criminals to Canberra just recently. Scott Morrison and others welcomed them. The entire immigration department exchanged gifts with them.
The rainy season in the capital Jakarta this month has caused multiple floods. A recently launched website enables Jakarta's citizens to share information in order to avoid flooded areas. I met one of the co-directors of petajakarta.org, ATN Turpin, to talk more about the innovation. So can you tell us a little bit more about petajakarta.org, how it will benefit Jakartans during the flood?
Yes, petajakarta.org is a project that it's a collaboration between the Smart Infrastructure Facility out of Australia, where I work, BPBD DKI Jakarta, the Jakarta Emergency Management Agency, and Twitter Incorporated. And so working together, we've designed free and open source software that collects all of the tweets in Jakarta about Banjir and then freely displays them in a navigational map so that you can find your way through the city and avoid the risk of flood.
Arrived in Sydney earlier this month, he made headlines. Not because he's relevant again, but because he was travelling with this guy, Tibet's spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama, who was in Australia for his 10th tour.
Smile, happy, compassionate, that's really beautiful.
It's a simple enough message, but delivering it is, well, a little bit more complicated. The Dalai Lama leaves today after a busy 2 weeks. Here he is in Sydney, Blue Mountains and Brisbane and Uluru and Perth. Thousands have flocked to see him give talks or hold workshops, and with them came their money. Turns out seeing the world's foremost authority on the metaphysical ain't cheap. During his visit, the Dalai Lama gave several public talks. Each venue differed in price, but attendees could expect to pay anywhere between $37 to $164 for a 2-hour talk. These were at the lower end of the spectrum. Among his first events was a 5-day retreat held at the Fairmont Resort in the Blue Mountains. Tickets alone cost somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000. To actually stay at the place, they cost you closer to $3,000. And to stay there as a couple, you were suddenly nudging $5,000. Now, fast forward to one of his last events, a Perth business luncheon entitled Can One Be Happy and Rich? And unfortunately, you'd have to be rich to find that one out because a single premium ticket was being flogged for up to $640.